in pretty soon. I think we're almost to 11 o'clock here. So, and we've got a fair amount of people tuned in. So we're going to be talking about tips for growing fruits and berries. So fruits and berries, I mean, as we've kind of talked about in webinars before, growing your own food is so rewarding, and it's such a great thing to do. That it's just there's so much benefit to it. Not only is it healthy, you know what you're putting on the plants, you know what you're growing the plants in, and it's just so rewarding to go and pick a fresh blueberry or strawberry or fig or all these things that I'm going to be talking about today, whether it's vegetables or herbs too. We've talked about vegetables and herbs at length. So it's always a great time to do that, and you still have time. That's what's so awesome is you always have time, and all the edible plants have been extremely popular this year. So I'll talk about that in a minute about kind of some of the issues that we might be having with stocking some of these things. But I really want to talk about fruits and berries today. Again, growing your own food is just a great rewarding thing that you can do. I'll give you some tips and some tricks on some specific things. I'm going to specifically talk about strawberries, blueberries, blackberries and raspberries, fruit trees as a general class, and then figs. So I'll kind of group them that way. Those are some of the best ones to grow in this area. And so that's kind of how I'm going to continue to do this, is I'll just go by each type of category there. And those are kind of some of the best berries that we grow in this area. I know there's probably a lot of other ones that maybe we're missing, but again, we've been in Hampton Roads for 75 years and we know what grows best in this area. We know what grows in our soil and our climate. And those are kind of some of our favorites, and that's what we're going to pass on to you. Let me take a quick minute here to explain a bit of our stocking issues that we've had with edible plants. Fruits and berries take a little bit more time to plant and propagate and get into a container with a good sized root system so that you can plant them and be successful. And so those take a little bit more time, whereas most of your vegetables and herbs come from seed, and therefore they're a little bit easier and faster for the growers to produce. So do bear with us if you were planning on coming in this weekend and you were wanting to get a fig or a blueberry or a strawberry or an apple tree or pear or peach. We might be a little bit limited. We might have a low quantity in stock. We might not have any. That's a difficult thing for us to do. We really want to be in stock of everything that we have. I'm going to talk about how to care for these plants so that you're armed with that information. But I do kind of want to just kind of get that out there and say it comes in ebbs and flows. And so what I do want to mention with that being said is fall is a great time to plant all of these. So as we kind of go through each category here, fall is an amazing time to plant strawberries and blueberries and figs and apple trees and all those different types of trees. If you've been thinking about this and you want to do it and you want to do it this weekend, we might be limited. We might not have them in stock, and I apologize for that. Our buyers are working very, very hard to get everything in that we possibly can, because we know a lot of people have time and they want to be out in their yard and they want to be doing these things. But it is difficult for the growers to keep up. Nobody obviously expected this, and so that's why it's been difficult for us to kind of keep those in stock as much as we would like to. And again, just trust us, we're working very hard. But in the fall, we hope to have a nice brand new crop. And so if you're thinking about doing these and you don't have them in your yard already, then check us back in the fall or check back in with us. I mean, just send us a Facebook question. Feel free to call the stores or just pop in and say, hey, did you get your fruit trees in yet? I know we're working tirelessly to get some of those in, especially here at our Independence location and even at our Great Neck location, where we can carry a little bit more of that larger plant material. So we're working very hard. Strawberries have been extremely popular this year. And so it's been very difficult to keep those in stock. And again, takes a little bit more time just to get those into a container with a good root system so that you're successful. And so I just wanted to start off by saying I do apologize that we're talking about a subject that maybe I don't have a lot of inventory in right now. But maybe you purchased a home that has a fruit tree and you want to know how to care for it. Or maybe you're trying to grow strawberries, or maybe you purchased strawberries in the past 2 months when we had them. And we do have some. But if you purchase something and you just kind of want to know general care techniques or tips and tricks that I have, that's what I'm here to do today, is kind of talk about all those different things. So we'll kind of get started on that note. Let's start with strawberries. Strawberries are so fun, great for all ages, very healthy, very beneficial to our health. And they're very easy to grow, and that's why I love strawberries. And you can grow them in so many different ways too, which is so much fun. So I'll go through kind of just the things that you need to know about strawberries. The first one, of course, is sunlight. Almost everything that we're going to talk about today would prefer all-day sun. Now, strawberries can take a little bit less. You would prefer, again, all-day sunlight. If you've ever gone strawberry picking, it's in a big field, wide open, full sun, all day long. That's what they love. Now, in your home, you might not have that kind of sun. You might not have all-day sun, especially where you might want to grow strawberries. So, again, 5 to 6 hours is typically good full sun. So as long as you're getting 5 to 6 hours, you can grow strawberries very well. A little bit less than that, you're not going to get as big of a yield, and even less than that, it might not do very well. So give them as much sunlight as you possibly can. Strawberries definitely like very, very good soil. So let's talk about where you can grow them. You can grow them almost anywhere. Of course, pots, we all think about a strawberry pot when we think about strawberries. So you can grow them in containers. You can grow them in just a regular ceramic pot, plastic pot, terracotta pot, strawberry pot. You can grow them in a hanging basket. If you've got raised beds, they're great in raised beds, and they're also great in the ground. I grew strawberries for many, many years in the ground. Loved it. It was a gorgeous ground cover. So you can actually even do foodscaping, using edible plants in your landscape. It's a gorgeous ground cover just by itself. It turns kind of this pretty red color in the winter. They're perennial. They come back every year. So they really don't even die off. I mean, they might get a little kind of crispy looking, a little cold burn on some of the leaves during the cold months in January and February, but they'll kick right back in March, and they're very, very easy plants to grow. If you do grow them in the ground, do know that they spread, similar to, like, let's say mint. Once you got it, you got them. So that they do spread, and we're going to talk about a little bit of that here in a minute. So strawberries can be grown in a lot of different locations, in a lot of different areas, in a lot of different ways: containers, raised beds, and in the ground. But also, so let's talk about what kind of soil we need for those different things. If we're growing in a container, of course we want to use potting soil. Always use potting soil. I always recommend that. Don't use a garden soil, don't use topsoil, and don't use compost. Now, you can make your own potting soil using some of those elements, but potting soil is designed for containers. It's got perlite, vermiculite, compost, peat moss, those types of things to really make a lighter mixture that can drain. If you use straight compost, it's going to heat up too much. It's going to turn into mud eventually. Topsoil, going to turn into mud. Garden soil doesn't have enough aeration. So you always want to use potting soil when you're in your pots. If you're doing a raised bed or you're doing it in the ground, then we definitely want, for strawberries, a rich organic matter. So we're going to want a little bit more compost than we're typically used to. So again, general recommendations for this area, especially our clay-based soils, a lot of us have clay soil, is going to be a third your soil, a third compost, a third perlite. Perlite are those little white styrofoam balls that you see in potting soils. Those things are great to help aeration and help the water work through the soil. And then compost is going to add nutrients. It's going to hold in some moisture, but it's also going to break up your clay soil. As it breaks down, it's going to release nutrients. So compost, perlite in your soil, that's how we're going to amend our soil in this area. You might go a little bit richer with compost for strawberries. You might do a little bit heavier in compost just because they really love that rich organic matter. Now, pH is important too. We'll talk about pH with pretty much everything that we're going to talk about today. pH, you want around a 5.8 to a 6.2, so slightly acidic, 7 being neutral. So we want to be down around a 5.8 to a 6.2. That would be ideal. But strawberries are pretty versatile. So they're going to grow in anything between a 5 and a 7, which is great for our area because in Hampton Roads, we typically have a very acidic soil. We've got oak trees, maples, pines. They all turn our soil slightly acidic. So they grow very well, easily in our soil. If you ever want to know your pH, you can always bring in a bag of soil into our Independence or Great Neck location. We do free pH tests for all our Garden Rewards customers. You can also buy a simple pH test. So you can buy a little pH tester if you want to do them at home. But knowing your pH is important. And why do we want to know pH? I'll mention that real quick so I don't have to talk about it on every single one. But pH is important because when we're in the right range of pH, then the plants can get the nutrients. So let's say we plant strawberries. They want to be in between a 5 and a 7. We'll keep it pretty broad. But you're at a 7.5 or you're at a 4.5. You're way out of range, and that means when you apply a fertilizer, it's only going to get 20 to 30% of the fertilizer that you're putting down. It can't get to the rest of the nutrients. It can't get to the nutrients that are already in the soil. The compost is releasing nutrients. can't get to that. So that's why pH is so important. And that's why we talk about it when we talk about a lot of different plants, especially our edible plants. We really want to make sure our pH is in that right range. When we talk about lawns, we want to make sure our pH is in that right range. Because again, we don't want to apply a fertilizer and the plants not get to use it. We're wasting money and we're not helping the environment and we're not helping our plants. So knowing your pH is super important, especially when growing edibles. And you'll typically see it in plants that'll struggle. You'll say, I just applied a fertilizer a couple weeks ago and my plants are still lime green. They don't look real healthy, usually because your pH is out of range. And if we get it back into the right range, it can get those nutrients in the soil and in your fertilizers. So pH is super important. Strawberry is like a 5.8 to a 6.2. And typically if you're using a potting soil, that's about the range that most potting soils are going to be in. Sometimes they'll be a little bit higher. We can always do a test on your potting soil, but if you're using our McDonald branded potting soil, they're usually right in that range somewhere, anywhere between a 6 and to 6.5 is the typical range. So that's good to know too, is that if you're growing in a potting soil, you might add a little bit of compost to your potting soil if you want to richen it up a little bit, but making sure that your pH is in the right range is very important. So let's talk again real quickly about organic matter. Organic matter is what our soil lacks. Organic matter is what helps strawberries grow. And our strawberries like a rich, well-drained soil. What wouldn't? And you always see that on tags. What does this plant prefer? Rich, well-drained soil. That's what they all like. But in strawberries, it's important. Strawberries need moisture. They like to have moisture. It's most of our fruits are going to want that. Because there's a lot of moisture in fruits, and so they need that consistent moisture. But they don't like a lot of moisture. So you don't want them in standing water. So again, if you've gone strawberry picking, you've probably seen them grow in rows. They probably have an irrigation system set up in there as well. So you want to make sure that they're getting consistent moisture, but they're not in standing water. If there's anything that really affects strawberries, it is a wilt, and it's called verticulum wilt. And that wilt can cause some of our strawberries to die in this area. And that's usually caused by overwatering, too much water or standing water. The root system is in water, and that's called root rot. Is a very common term that you'll hear us say a lot. Your plants die because of root rot. That means you need a well-drained soil. So adding perlite, maybe even sand, that will help kind of break up your soil and get it well-drained. So that's important to know when we're growing strawberries. And that's why growing them in containers is great, because you got good drainage. We've got the drainage hole in the bottom. We know that the water's going through the soil and coming out. And that's why a lot of people grow strawberries in pots, and it's a great solution as well. So let's talk about some of the varieties. Lots of different varieties of strawberries out there. Really, there's a ton. Very difficult for me to mention all of them. We're constantly getting in different ones as we can find them available. What I like to do is break them into two different groups, really. June-bearing strawberries and ever-bearing strawberries. And it's up to you which one you prefer. Now, June-bearing strawberries are usually your biggest strawberries. So they can get, pretty good size. If you've ever bought them from the supermarket and you get these huge strawberries, those are probably June-bearing strawberries. And June-bearing strawberries definitely are going to produce a heavy group for about a 3 to 4 week period. Typically, it's about a month, maybe 2 to 3 weeks. And then they're going to stop. So they produce in June, basically. That's why they're called June bearing. So they're going to produce a large crop in June, typically. Maybe slightly before that. You'll get a couple here and there. But typically, that's what you're going to do. And then after that, they're going to stop. They're not going to produce any more strawberries. But you get a large crop. So if you like to make lots of desserts or different things with strawberries, it's a great plant to grow, a great type to grow, because you get a large crop very quickly. Now then there's ever-bearing strawberries, and hence the name. They produce all the way through the growing season. So you're going to get a smaller crop, but consistently through the season, and they're typically slightly smaller strawberries. So typically in your 1 to 2 inch range strawberry, and then the June bearings are going to be in that 2 to 3 inch size of strawberries, so much larger strawberries. Lots of different varieties in both of those groups. All of our tags will tell you if they're an ever-bearing or a June-bearing. And typically most people want ever-bearing. And that's because they're easy to grow and you get a consistent crop throughout the entire season. So you're going to get some here, you're going to get some every 2 or 3 weeks you'll get a nice little crop. So they're very easy to grow and you get that consistent crop to kind of eat on. So strawberries are great, very easy to do. Those are really the two classifications. Again, there's tons of different varieties. I couldn't go through all of them right now, And I wouldn't want to because I don't know that I have enough of them to be able to support that. But we do carry strawberries, and we'll carry them again in the fall if you can't get them now. And fall is a great time to plant strawberries. And let me tell you why. Because really, these strawberries that I might plant this year, and I'll show you this one right here. I've got a strawberry right here. It's got actually strawberries growing right off to the side here. So you can see those strawberries coming off. So you'll get some strawberries this year, but you're really not going to get the best crop of strawberries until next year. So whenever we're growing strawberries, really it's going to be your second year is going to be the best year that you get. And then even after that, 3 or 4 years down the road, you'll get some more. Now let's talk about growing them in the ground for a minute, because I think that's what a lot of people are scared about is when they're growing in the ground, what do I do? So June bearing strawberries, I typically recommend them just letting them go a little bit in the ground. They do kind of spread. I think if you've ever grown strawberries before, they send off runners. So they'll send off a little other plant. It'll pop, it'll hit the ground, it'll root in and form a whole new plant. June bearing, it's a great idea to kind of let them do that. Now you might single out some and take some out. Ever-bearing strawberries, I do typically recommend to about the July time frame, taking those runners off and letting the mother plant do all the producing, because it takes a lot of energy to produce another plant. So that mother plant, that host plant, is producing all these little babies, and it's putting energy into that when you really want it putting energy into the fruit. Not as big of an issue with the June bearing, but ever-bearing, I do typically recommend taking some of those runners off. You don't have to take all of them off. You can cut them off and produce another plant if you want to. That's what a lot of people do with a strawberry jar like this, is they'll plant one strawberry in the top. As it sends a shoot out, you can cut it off, put it in the soil, let it root, and continue to grow from there. And you can fill up the strawberry jar just from one plant over time. So that's kind of how you would grow them in the ground. I typically just grow them in the landscape and just let them kind of fill out as a ground cover. Every once in a while, I'll go and thin them out a little bit. So I'll go and take some of those older plants that maybe have been in the ground for 3 or 4 years, take those out, let the younger plants kind of be my producers. And then sometimes I'll go in there and just thin them out. Now, sometimes what will happen with June bearing and ever bearing is if you're kind of letting them go, they'll kind of compete with each other and they can take some nutrients from each other. So you definitely want to go in every once in a while, thin them out, take out some of the older plants, maybe take out some of the younger plants that don't look like they're doing as well or are growing too close together. Typically you want 1 plant per square foot. So 1 plant can take up a 12 by 12 area. And that's kind of how you want to kind of judge how many to grow in that area. But let some of the runners grow, let them produce other plants. With ever-bearing, just cut the baby plants off until July 1st, and then after that, let them produce some babies for you to have for next year. Because again, then you'll get more and more crops. Now, if you're growing them in containers, again, with ever-bearing or June-bearing, you can take some of those runners off, let the host plant produce the majority of the fruit for you, and kind of go from there. You can also, again, propagate them very, very easily to spread them into other containers or into a strawberry jar like this. So real quickly, I'll kind of recap strawberries for you real quick. Strawberries like a low pH. Let me tell you about a couple of different products. And I'll really talk about these with blueberries, so I'll save that a little bit for blueberries. But you can make your soil more acidic if you need to. We can raise the pH if we need to. Not a lot of disease issues with strawberries. Make sure they're well-drained soil. Make sure you've got well-drained, rich organic soil. That's very, very important. Know the difference between ever-bearing and June-bearing varieties. You can give them a fertilizer with Berrytone, or of course, our organic or traditional green leaf fertilizers. So we've got those. Those are great for strawberries, very easy to use. And then some watering requirements. Of course, watering in containers, you're going to water a little bit heavier in containers. You know you're getting good drainage, but you've also got air, wind, evaporation, all those different things that are going to cause your containers to dry out quicker. Now in the ground, you want about 1 inch to 2 inches of water per week. And so the best way to do that is, of course, don't water the leaves, water the root system. We always want to water the root system of our plants, not the leaves. That causes fungus and disease. And then again, make sure you got well-drained soil. So pretty easy. Again, there's not many issues that happen with strawberries. If I've ever had an issue, it's been slugs or squirrels. So slugs, of course, we've got an organic slug and snail killer that you can put around the area of your strawberry patch. Or if you've got a container and you're having slugs crawl up it every night, check underneath. That's usually where they're hiding. Slugs like to hide in a cool, dark place during the day, and then they come out at night, and they'll usually just eat a couple holes out of each strawberry. And then, of course, Squirrels will get in there as well, and we've got lots of different products that you can use as a repellent for squirrels. We've got animal repellent. This is just capsaicin, so it's that hot pepper that will help. And then, of course, our Repellex squirrel repellent. So a couple different ways to kind of keep those pesky squirrels and the slugs out of our strawberry patch. But other than that, they're pretty easy. So go for it. Try them if you've got them. And you've got some extras, you can share them with your friends and family. But strawberries are so rewarding, so easy, very healthy, and a great option for growing in our backyards or in containers. So that's strawberries. So I'm going to move some of this stuff out of the way a little bit as I kind of begin to talk about other different plants. Because my next one is blackberries and raspberries. Now, unfortunately, I am sold out of blackberries and raspberries right now. But blackberries and raspberries are very easy to grow as well. So a lot of us maybe, remember picking wild blackberries and raspberries, especially if you live in the country. They grow wild. They're very easy to grow. And because a plant grows wild in this area, we know it grows very well, and we know it's easy to do. And so blackberries and raspberries love to grow in full sun, of course, always full sun, as much sun as you can get them. At least 5 to 6 hours of that hot afternoon sun would be ideal. So blackberries and raspberries want that full sun. And then also, I tend to grow them in the ground more. Now, there are new varieties that have been coming out. Again, kind of difficult to get our hands on right now. A lot of these berries are very popular. But there are new varieties that can be grown in containers that are dwarfs, that maybe don't get quite as big. I know like the Brazzleberry series from Monrovia was a good option. But some of those are smaller growing blackberries or raspberries that you can grow in containers. So there's some options out there for you as well if you don't have space in the yard. Now, typically blackberries and raspberries don't get very big. They're cane plants, so that's where we're going to talk about that in a second. Cane berries. A lot of people group them and call them cane berries because they grow on canes. They grow on these long shoots that come out of the crown of the plant, and that's kind of what they grow on. And so typically a lot of people grow them on a fence or some sort of trellis to kind of keep them a little bit contained. You don't have to, but I think it does help kind of keep the plants off the ground. But that's, you don't have to do that. It does kind of keep them contained a little bit, keeps them a little bit more vertical, and doesn't take up quite as much depth in your yard. But blueberries, or raspberries and blackberries are called cane berries because they grow on canes. The pH, again, is very similar to what our natural pH is in this area, 5.8 to 6.2. So again, very easy for us to do. We don't have to worry about our pH too much with blackberries and raspberries. They grow very normal in our soil in this area. That's why they grow wildly in our area. So you don't have to worry about pH too much. Again, we can do a pH test. If we need to adjust the pH, we can. Very easy to do. They do like rich organic matter again, so you do want to amend your soil. Again, if you're getting some of those dwarf types, always do them in potting soil. If we're doing them in the ground, we want to amend our soil with, again, compost and perlite. Rich, well-drained soil. That's how we attain that, is we amend our soil with our compost and perlite, and we keep our soil in there as well. But they're not as picky about soil, so you don't have to worry too much. They're pretty strong, durable plants. A lot of varieties of blackberries and raspberries have thorns. There are new varieties that don't have thorns. So I always kind of go to the triple crown blackberry. It was always kind of my favorite. And we'll try and get more of those in. But it was, named triple crown because it was thornless. It was very sweet. It was a heavy producer. It had three different things, which was why they called it triple crown. But they come in lots of different colors too. Of course, blackberries are black, but raspberries can come in a yellow to the raspberry red color to black. So a lot of different types. A lot of people don't know the difference because especially when they're growing, you can't really tell. They have a very similar shape in the fruit, but when you take that berry off, a raspberry is going to have a cup on the inside that you're going to notice it's going to fall off, and that cup is just kind of natural. That's what stays on the plant, and then your berry comes off of that. Blackberries, the whole thing comes off. But they're very rewarding, very sweet, very healthy, great snack, great in salads. Lots of different uses for blackberries and raspberries, and very easy to grow. Now, let's talk about why they're called cane berries. Because they grow on canes. They grow on these long shoots that come out of the crown, and those are usually going to produce the best in the second year. So again, you might get a little bit the first year. The second year, you're going to get a big crop, and then they're going to begin to dwindle, and typically that's why we recommend caning them. And that's where you're going to take your pruners and just prune it all the way down to the base of that plant, and it's called caning because you're taking the entire cane out and letting the plant send up a new cane. And then that new cane is going to produce for you on the second year the best. And then again, we go through the same process. So that plant will continue to produce new canes for years and years and years to come. Very easy to do. It just takes a little bit of maintenance to go in there every once in a while and cane those plants out and take the canes out. So that's why they're called caneberries. Fertilizing, you don't need to fertilize as much. We want to fertilize typically after they're done blooming to help them produce the fruit. And then again, once they're done fruiting, to kind of give them a little bit of energy because they've spent a lot of energy producing that fruit and berry for you. Again, berry tone is a great organic option. And again, our McDonald green leaf fertilizers are an amazing option for that as well. So that's really how you want to fertilize your blackberries and raspberries with our organic green leaf. And again, with our with berry tone is another good option. So that's really about it. Mulching them. I didn't talk about mulching on strawberries, so maybe I'll save mulching for the end, and we'll talk about mulching in general. Watering with blackberries and raspberries. These are almost basically shrubs, so they're going to go dormant in the winter. They're going to lose a majority of their leaves, almost all of them, and then they're going to go dormant. And so watering a shrub, really, it's just the initial watering process. We want to get them through that initial acclimation period. And I always tell people when we'll talk about it's going to be the same with blueberries and fruit trees and figs, so we'll get that out of the way right now. When we want to water deep and less often. So we want to really, really give it a good soaking and let it dry out. And in that 2 to 3 or 4 day time frame that we're not watering the plants, those roots will start to search for water themselves. And that's how we get a plant to acclimate or to dig in or to root very quickly into your soil so that it can take care of itself. Mulching will again help keep the consistency of moisture in the soil better. We'll talk about mulching at the end. But watering every 2 to 3 days with your bushes, so your blueberries, your figs, your trees, every 2 to 3 days, a deep watering less often. That's how we get our trees to be established. Now, once we hit the summer time frame and we hit a 95-degree day or week, and it hasn't rained for a while, then we definitely want to go out there and give it a good soaking just to get it through those hot times for the first year. After that, you're pretty much okay. I mean, always watch your edible plants, especially blueberries and figs and blackberries and raspberries during those drier times because, again, lots of moisture goes into producing these fruits, so you don't want to lose that moisture content. While they're drought tolerant, while they probably will survive, the fruit won't be as good because we let them go too dry too long. So if it's ever 3 or 4 or 5 years down the road and we have a 100-degree day or a up in the upper 90s all week long and it hasn't rained, give them some water. And again, that deep watering, go out there, drop the hose on it. Don't do a full blast and don't do a trickle. Just kind of get it in the middle somewhere and just drop your hose at the base of the plant, walk away, let it soak in there for a good 30 minutes. Give it a really, really good deep watering. And that's the best way to water our plants with bigger root systems like our shrubs and trees. All right, so then that's basically it on blackberries and raspberries. Pretty simple, pretty easy. Again, fall is a great time to plant those because all those canes that we have on those plants when you plant them are going to produce for you the next year. So you're going to get a bigger production that next season. Whereas if you plant it now, those canes are brand new and you might not get as big of a production. So planting in the fall is not a bad option for blackberries and raspberries. And so if you're thinking about doing it and you maybe think like you may be running out of time, hopefully we'll get more in. But if we don't, fall is a great time to kind of check back and do some blackberries and raspberries. All right, so next I want to talk about blueberries. Blueberries are very, very popular in this area, and I wonder why. Well, blueberries are super, super healthy, very easy to grow, and there's lots and lots of different varieties now. And they're just so tasty and fun to pick. And I think a lot of us that maybe have grown up in this area or went down to Nags Head or North Carolina, we probably pick blueberries on a blueberry farm. Of course, there's a lot of them here in the state of Virginia as well. But blueberries just kind of take me back to the blueberry farm where I would walk around with my family and pick the blueberries, put them in a basket. You probably end up eating more than you actually take home with you. But blueberries are very, very easy to grow as well. I think probably the most important thing, I don't know if I lost you guys. Let me come around and just check this video and see. It says we're having trouble playing the video. Well, it's saying that it's still taping, so hopefully it is. I can't see the video still taping, so hopefully it's still going. I see the timer still running, so it says I can see you and hear you fine. Great. All right, so I'll keep on going. Sorry about that. Just all of a sudden my screen went blank and nothing was there anymore. Blueberries. I was talking about blueberries. Blueberries are very easy. I'm just going to read everybody's comment. All right, you're still going to work. All right, great. So everything's good. All right, blueberries. Very easy to grow and so much fun for all the ages. And again, so many different sizes. They have lots of different sizes now and lots of different varieties. I know when I was first started in the garden center 17 years ago, we really only sold one variety. It was called rabbit eyes. Rabbit eyes are great blueberry plants. They get typically about the 6 to 8 foot high and wide range, so they're big plants. A lot of people didn't have the space to do that. You also needed 2 different varieties in order to grow those. So I always remember them. Tiff Blue, Climax, Premier were the 3 varieties that we carried in the rabbit eyes. But rabbit eye varieties are big bushes. They're great blueberries. If you got the space, it's a great option for you. I am a little low in stock right now in those as well. But over the years, they've come up with these new varieties. I mean, this is a gorgeous plant. This is Bountiful Blue. Awesome foliage. I just love the look of a blueberry. Again, this is where we'll talk about kind of that foodscaping, because you can grow these in containers. Bountiful Blue only gets about 4x4, so you can grow this in a container. You can grow it in your landscape. It's a gorgeous plant. They're almost evergreen, really, in this area. So a lot of them will hold a lot of their leaves. They get this gorgeous kind of reddish fall color to them, winter color. Awesome, awesome plants. I love the blue foliage in the spring and summer. And then, of course, they produce blueberries. So why do everybody love, why do we love growing blueberries in this area? Well, because they love acidic soil. So I know when I talked about strawberries and blackberries and raspberries, we're talking about a 5.8 to a 6.2 generally, anywhere between a 5 and a 7 as a broader range. But blueberries really like it acidic. So blueberries like a 4.5 to a 5.5. So much, much more acidic, which a lot of us might be in that range or pretty close to. And we want to make them more acidic. And so if you've ever grown blueberries and had problems, that's why I brought this bag of soil acidifier. So soil acidifier is going to bring your pH down, and it's going to help keep it down. And it's not aluminum sulfate. I know a lot of times back in the day, I know when I first started, it was aluminum sulfate. Well, but aluminum can actually become a poison if we apply too much of it. It will hurt the plant. It can get into the fruit. We don't want to eat that. So we just use sulfur now. It's just soil sulfur. It's completely safe, and it's going to bring down your pH. And it's going to keep it in that right range for you. So soil sulfur is a great one. Soil acidifier by Espoma. It's organic. It's very, very safe, and you can use it to help kind of control that pH. Again, we do free pH testing, so that'll help you kind of know the range of your pH. But they like it low. So if you've ever had issues with your blueberries and you've never really known why, most likely it's your pH. And we're going to want to do a pH test to make sure that we can get the pH down to the right range so that, again, it can get the nutrients out of the soil. And again, there's so much versatility in the different types because now they grow anywhere from 2x2 to 3x3, 4x4. So you can grow them in containers, you can grow them in the landscape, you can grow them in smaller spaces, all the way up to those big ones. So if you want lots of blueberries, rabbit eye varieties are a great one. Again, fall is a great time to plant these. I didn't mention it with the blackberries and raspberries, but fall is an amazing time to plant in Hampton Roads. And especially for our larger plants, our blueberries, our figs, our fruit trees, they really love being planted in the fall. And the reason why is because that's typically when root systems grow. So you're not going to get a lot of top growth, but that's what's happening underneath the soil is your root system is taking and really getting nice and big and healthy. It's cooling down. All that energy, all that photosynthesis, some food is getting stored into the root system. It's exploding in the root system, and that's why it's really good to plant in the fall. And then, of course, we get more rain in the cool season. They go dormant in the winter. Spring, we get a little bit more rain. You don't have to worry about it as much, and it's a longer time. So now you planted in the fall. You've been through fall, winter, and spring without a lot of maintenance or worry about the plant. And then it's summer, and it's very, very acclimated. It's been in the ground for almost 9 months, and we're hitting summer time frame. So that's why we love to plant in fall. So again, if you're thinking about doing this and we don't have quite the selection that you're looking for right now, wait till the fall. Great time to plant all of these. If you inherited some blueberries and you're wondering what they are, difficult sometimes to tell the variety. You can always bring a clipping in, let us look at it. If you get some blueberries, we might be able to help you by looking at the blueberry. But if you're having issues, check your pH. That's a really, really good telltale sign. I love to mulch my blueberries with pine straw, pine bark mulch. That'll help bring the pH down as well, and it'll help keep the moisture in there as well. It's very, very easy to do. You don't have to water as much. Now, if anybody ever has a qualm, an issue with blueberries, it's the birds and the squirrels. So unfortunately, there's not a lot of options out there. Birds don't taste the capsaicin, so while you can spray it with a hot pepper wax like this, which would be completely safe to do, this animal repellent, which is basically capsaicin, it'll help with the squirrels, but it's not going to help with the birds as much. So there is bird netting. Bird netting works as well. So you can put the bird netting over top of the plant, and then that'll protect your blueberries. I usually say wait till your blueberries are getting closer to being ripe, or as you start to see some birds go in there and start to peck at it, then use your bird netting. Because if you put this on at the beginning of the season, those plants start to grow through it, good luck getting the netting out of there. Bird netting is kind of a pain to work with. I definitely know that, but it is really about the only option that we have. There are other repellents that you can spray to hopefully help with the birds. Some people will try, the flashing things, hanging some different things around in the area, kind of create noise or create flashes that the birds don't like. But bird netting is a great option. We carry it in a few different sizes, 14 by 14 if you're doing a big shrub or a big plant or a tree, and then 7 by 20 if you're doing a row of blueberries. So you got a couple different options there. I just usually say with my bird netting, throw it on right before they start to ripen, so you don't get a lot of growth through it. Then you can go in there and pick so that the birds don't get all of them, and then you can go and take the netting off when you're done with your harvest. But blueberries are very easy. There's lots and lots of different varieties. Again, too many varieties for me to go over right now. And very disease and insect resistant. They don't have a lot of issues. They grow in this area naturally. Wild blueberries, of course, grow in our area. That's why if you have deer, they love the wild blueberries. But so many different varieties, lots of different sizes, lots of different time frames. The nice thing is a lot of these dwarf varieties don't need cross-pollinators, so they don't need another pollinator to help with the pollination that you get blueberries. The rabbit eye varieties you do. So of course, if you're doing rabbit eyes or that's something you want to do, you do need 2 different varieties. But with most of your dwarf ones, which are going to be in the southern high bush or the northern high bush varieties, don't need cross-pollination. Now, if you got 2 different varieties, or if you got 2 Bountiful Blues, you're going to get a bigger production. So that's what I always tell people, you don't need it, but if you have the space to do a couple different varieties or a couple different bushes, then do it. You'll get a bigger production. So that's kind of the story on blueberries. You don't have to have cross-pollination with a lot of these new varieties, but if you do get it, then you'll get a bigger production. So I definitely recommend it if you can do it, if you've got the space. Any other notes on blueberries? Blueberries, you want to prune after you've done harvesting, so you want to go and prune it so that it can put out new growth before we go dormant. And then that way it'll flower freely in the spring. That's about the only time to prune them. You can do light pruning on it through the season. So obviously I've got these really pretty tips. I could go and take some of these tips off just to kind of help keep the plant bushy and full, because I know it's not going to flower anymore, and that'll just help throughout the season. It's not going to hurt my harvest. I'm not cutting off any blueberries. So that's an option on when to prune. But basically I always tell people, let it flower in the spring, fertilize it when it's done flowering so that you can get those nice big blueberries. Keep them moist through dry spells. Do a little bit of light tipping here and there. Harvest after you've harvested your blueberries, which can be a lot of different time frames depending on variety. After you've harvested your blueberries, then go and do a nice pruning just to kind of keep them nice and full and in shape. It'll put out a nice bush of new growth, and you'll go into the dormant season with that gorgeous fall color. Awesome, awesome plants, super easy, lots of versatility, lots of different sizes. So that's kind of the tips and tricks on blueberries. So definitely, try those out if you haven't tried blueberries before. All right, so the next group is fruit trees. Now, fruit trees is a huge, huge group of plants. And of course, I'm out of fruit trees right now, for the most part. I do have figs, which you could classify as a fruit tree. I'm not going to. I'm going to talk about those specifically. I do have some persimmons, which I'll talk about those as well. But most of the fruit trees that we carry are apples, cherries, plums, peaches, and pears. So lots and lots of different types of fruit trees that you can grow in this area. Very easy. I think probably the most important thing to know about fruit trees, I know lots of people always used to come in and say, I want the Bartlett pear. Well, Bartlett pears are huge pear trees. And they get 40 by 40. They're humongous trees, and it takes almost 10 years for them to produce fruit. So what we sell are dwarf or semi-dwarf fruit trees. And what that means is they're going to produce at a much younger age. In fact, they'll produce on this size of a tree right here next to me. So I'll pull one of these. Let's do this one. I'll pull this a little closer because I can maybe show you a little demonstration on how to prune fruit trees. So what you want to do with fruit trees, well, let's just go back to a tree this size will produce fruit the first year. Now, most of your dwarf or semi-dwarf fruit trees are going to get somewhere between 10 to 15 feet high, depending on the variety, depending on whether it's semi-dwarf or dwarf. And so they're going to get somewhere between 10 to 15 feet high. Why is that great? Well, one, it produces fruit very quickly, and two, you can get to the fruit. That's why I love semi-dwarf or dwarf fruit trees. Most of us don't have the space for a 40-foot tree in our backyard or in our front yard, so having a nice smaller tree that you can get to and you can harvest is the way to go. And they produce at such an earlier age. Now again, there's lots of different types of apples, peaches, pears, cherries, plums, lots of different varieties out there. Most of them do need cross-pollination, so sometimes you're going to need two different fruit trees or two different types of apples in order to cross-pollinate. So I always kind of go, I know Golden Delicious is one of the only self-pollinated apples that we carry in this area. So Golden Delicious you can do by yourself. But if you want a Red Delicious, then you need a Granny Smith or another type of apple tree to cross-pollinate. A lot of times I'll tell people start with the Golden Delicious. If you're successful and you're having fun with it and you want to add on to it, then the Golden Delicious will help pollinate the other ones. So there's a great option for you as well. Some people will plant a single fruit tree, whether it needs cross-pollination or not. Let's say it does need cross-pollination, and there might be another fruit tree in the area that helps pollinate it. So, you know, a neighbor 3 or 4 houses down might have a fruit tree that's helped cross-pollination with your fruit tree. So you don't always have to get it. Sometimes you can just try it, but I do recommend, of course, always reading the label. And again, I can't go through all the different varieties. There's too many to talk about right now. It'd be another 2-hour seminar on just going through all the varieties of fruit trees. But apples and cherries and plums and pears are very easy to grow in this area. What the typical issues that we have with fruit trees in this area is fungus or disease issues. So they do carry some issues. They do carry some problems that we definitely want to recognize. And so a lot of them are rust or different types of wilts or different types of leaf curls and those types of things. And then, of course, insects. Worms that'll get into your peaches, your apples, and lots of different things like that. So I do want to take a minute just to explain the spray schedule. This is called a fruit tree spray. We carry Bonide fruit tree spray. You could also use triple action, which is a great option. Completely organic. They're almost identical. This one's got one additional insecticide in it. But basically, very, very safe, designed for fruit trees. Triple action is organic, easy to use, hose-in sprayer. Then we've got our fruit tree spray. But I think the hardest thing to kind of remember is when to spray. And so I'll explain that to you real quick. We'll put it in our notes so you don't have to write it down. But if you do want to write it down, here's kind of this quick rundown on the spray schedule because I think it's important to know. The first time we spray is when the buds, the flower buds, are swollen, starting to show a little color, but not open yet. So we're going to give the tree a big spray down then. And then we're going to let the flowers open. Again, the reason we don't spray when the flowers are open is because we need the insects to help cross-pollinate, so we don't want to kill any of those insects. So the bees and the other insects that are helping cross-pollinate our trees or pollinate each flower, we don't want to hurt those. So we want to spray when those buds are swollen, almost about to open, but not open yet. That'll help. Now, when those flowers are open is when insect disease, fungus issues can occur because there's an opening in our plant. There's a way for those to get in. And so that's why, we can't spray during that time because we're trying to get the pollination. As soon as those petals fall off, as soon as all your flowers fall off your tree, then you want to do your second spray. So that's spray number 2. Then you want to do it 2 weeks after that, 2 weeks after that spray, 4 weeks after that, and then 4 weeks after that one. So we're going to get, about 6 sprays in there? So again, pre-bloom, buds swollen, and then after the petals fall off, so when the petals completely fall off, we do our second spray. Then we're going to do one 2 weeks after that, 2 weeks after that one, 4 weeks, 4 weeks. So again, pre-bloom, after bloom, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 4 weeks. That's 6 sprays. And that's going to get you through the majority of the season. Sounds like a lot, but that's because we need to really protect our fruits and apples from those insects and diseases that are out there. Unfortunately, we have a high wind area, so we live in a lot of windy areas where diseases and different types of issues occur in the air. We typically have wet periods, and when we have long, wet Overcast periods, that's when diseases can spread as well. And then, of course, insect issues. When you're talking about softer fruited, like peaches and plums, those things that are easy for those insects to get into, that can also occur. So that's kind of why we talk about the fruit tree spray schedule. You can use both of these products. They're great. Triple action, I definitely recommend having around the home anyways, because if you don't know what the problem is, it probably cures it, and it's completely safe for everything. Fruit tree spray is a little bit stronger, so if you've had issues with fruit trees, maybe you inherited a fruit tree and you don't know what's going on with it, definitely want to come in and get some fruit tree. It's never too late to start that spray schedule, so come on in and get some of that. We definitely always have these available in case you need those. If you have specific types of rust or other specific types of diseases, there is a copper soap fungicide made by Natural Guard. That's another good option as well. And again, if you bring in a leaf or a picture, it does kind of help, but bringing in an actual sample does really help us kind of identify what those problems might be. So what else with fruit trees? So planting, we always want to plant at the depth of the pot. So I'll use my blueberry here as an example. I think a lot of us, so fruit trees nowadays are grafted. So there's a graft point down at the bottom of the tree, and I think a lot of us think that needs to go underneath the ground. Well, it doesn't. So what you want to do is you want to plant level. So this pot has a root ball on top. So this entire soil ball in here is called a root ball. And then this top layer of the soil needs to match our top layer of our soil. So we never want to bury the plant. If we put it too deep, we're going to cause it to die. If we put it way too high, then it's going to drain too well. It's never going to be able to hold moisture. The feeder roots on the top of this aren't going to be able to get any moisture. It's up on this hill, and they're going to dry out and die as well. So we never want to bury it. We never want to put it too high. I always say, just to be on the safe side, plant it about 1/2 inch to 1 inch higher than level. So I might plant the root ball right there, and then I'll just take a little bit of soil and grade it up to the side. So that's kind of how we're going to plant our fruit trees. Again, amend your soil. So whether you're planting persimmons or apples or cherries, any of those, you always want to amend your soil, like I mentioned before, with compost and perlite. That's how we amend our soil. 1/3 your soil, 1/3 compost, 1/3 perlite. Watering a bigger root ball, such as this persimmon. So I'll show you what the root ball looks like on this tree. So we got this big root ball here, right? So we got this big plant. I don't know if you can see that. But this is about a probably 10-gallon pot. So we got a bigger root ball, and so we're going to have to make sure we get adequate water into that root system. And so then when I was talking about watering earlier, that's what we want to do with trees for sure. Water less often, but deep. So drop your hose on it, let it soak that soil really well, and then don't do it for another 3 to 4 days. In cooler weather, 2 to 3 days when it's warmer. And do that for about 2 to 3 weeks, and you're pretty much safe after that. And then again, just watch your temperatures in the summer. If it's starting to get really hot and dry, then you definitely want to give it a little bit of supplemental water at that point. Never water the leaves, always water the foliage, always water the root system. That's how we water plants. We never want to water our leaves. And then, of course, fertilization. Again, same thing with all your fruits. You typically want to fertilize right before or right after it's blooming. So you never want to fertilize before blooming because you can force the blooms out real quick, then they fall off real quick and they don't have time to pollinate. And so you want to always wait until it's done blooming. So after your fruits are done blooming, then we want to fertilize. And for fruit trees, you can use this great one by Fertilome. It's called Fruit, Citrus, and Pecan Tree Food. Awesome, awesome. It's got lots of zinc, which is super important for our fruit trees and pecan trees. And then, of course, our McDonald Greenleaf fertilizers would be a great option as well. In fact, our traditional McDonald Greenleaf is very similar to this fertilizer right here. So really, really good options for you. So we want to fertilize after it's done blooming, and then again after it's set fruit. Now, a lot of us that maybe have grown fruit trees might experience fruit loss when they drop fruit. And that happens. That does happen. It's part of survival. You know, the tree is producing blooms to reproduce, to form that fruit, to form a seed. That's the whole point of doing it. So a lot of us have probably experienced this with peaches a lot of time. You get thousands of peaches on a tree, and then all of a sudden the next day it's starting to drop them like crazy. And you're super worried, like, oh, I was going to have 1,000 peaches. Well, one of it's probably natural. It's saying, man, I produced a lot of fruit this year. I can't support all this. So I'm going to drop some so that I can support what I can keep. And so it'll drop maybe half, depends on the tree, depends on the nutrition level. So it'll drop some of the fruit, and that's completely natural. Now, it could be there's not enough nutrients in the soil, and so that's where we would want to make sure that we're applying fertilizers, applying plant food to keep the nutrient level up in that soil area. And the nice thing to know about that is to fertilize in its drip zone. So as these trees get 10 to 12 feet high and wide, we want to fertilize it in the drip area. So if I'm a tree and my branch is hanging out here, then right below that, where all the water kind of drips off the canopy of the tree and drips onto the ground, that's where all my feeder roots are. So to never fertilize right up on the trunk of a tree, because no feeder roots are really there. They're really out in its drip line. And so we want to fertilize out there. And I think a lot of people say, I fertilized my tree, but you didn't get it in the drip line. And that's where it's important to kind of put those fertilizers down and put our plant food down to help get the nutrient level up there. And that can help hold some of your fruits. Now, it could be that it's got disease, could have some sort of stress factor occurring on it. That's why I always grab my Super Thrive, one of my favorite products. A lot of us inherit fruit trees and don't know what to do with them. And they've been there a long time, and maybe they're producing some for you, maybe not. But Super Thrive takes the stress off of a tree. So if you've ever got a plant that seems stressed out, it's dropping lots of fruit, can't seem to hold on to it, it looks healthy, but it's not holding on to anything, Super Thrive can take the shock off of a plant. I kind of call it like steroids for plants. So it's a vitamin supplement. It's not a fertilizer, a standalone fertilizer by itself. You want to use it in a fertilizing program as well. But Super Thrive is a great product just to kind of take the shock off of the plant. So if you've got an old, established fruit tree and you want to revive it, this is a great option to revive your fruit trees. And to revive any plant that might be in some sort of shock. So I'm going to take a second here and show you quickly on how to prune fruit trees. A lot of times what happens, persimmons, cherries, apples, peaches, any of those fruit trees, especially apples and the bigger fruits, persimmons, they'll get them on the ends of the branches and your branches will hang like this. Well, that's not good. And so we want to definitely prune for the first couple of years. When we prune the branch of a tree, what happens is it's going to get stronger underneath. So I got this long shoot of growth. This all came out this year. And I've got a prune point here from last year. I don't know if you can see that, but right there is where I got pruned last year. I got this branch, I got another branch under here. All these brand new branches that came out of here, which is great. That's why we prune. To form more branches, holds more fruit. The problem is if we don't prune these branches, they're going to get real weak. And they're going to get fruit set out here, and the next year you're not going to want to prune it off because you're going to lose your fruit, and your branch is going to bend, and then eventually it could break. And we don't want to cause, again, any more stress. So it's a great practice to go out and prune your fruit trees. And that's what we call tipping, where we're just going to take that branch, cut it off. I've got this nice, strong branch now. You can see how rigid that is. Let's see if I can turn it so you can really see it. It's nice and rigid now. I got this other long shoot up here. I'm going to go in and prune that. I'm pruning at an angle, so if you can see that angle there, so that water doesn't sit on that open wound and cause disease or issues down the road. And I'm cutting about 1/4 of an inch from the leaf node, so where that leaf hits the branch. So again, if this was a branch, you can see where that leaf hits the branch. So I'm going to prune at an angle, about 1/4 of an inch from there, and that's where we prune it. Because now this is going to die back a little bit, but we're not going to have a big dead stem there. And then you can see right in there, there's a new node there where a new branch can come out. So that's how I'm going to prune fruit trees. I'm just going to go through it. It's just called tipping. We're just tipping, and of course, we're going to look for crossing branches as well. Let's see if I've got any on here. Yep, so right here I've got this branch right here, nice big strong branch, real healthy branch. I'm going to tip that back. But I also noticed in here that I've got a branch that's crossing across it. And what's going to happen is those branches are going to rub with each other over time as they get bigger. So I'm just going to go in and actually eliminate that one right back to the trunk. We don't need it. We want to open up the airflow too. So again, I always kind of think of fruit trees and roses kind of all in the same. I kind of want to open it up. I want to create kind of a hand. So I want these nice big strong branches all coming outward, keeping the area on the inside a little bit more on the hollow side so that sunlight can get in there, airflow. Good airflow means less disease and issues down the road. So eventually we'll go through and kind of prune all these weaker branches out. We'll take some of those. And of course, if you've got any dead wood, so I don't know if you can see that one right there, but there's a dead branch right there. So we definitely want to cut that out, get that out of there, one for looks, but also for health. We don't want wood rotting over time. So if we've got a dead branch, we need to cut that off. So we've got a couple of dead branches there we're going to cut off. And I'll go and finish this later and just go through and tip off some of these new shoots. We've got all this gorgeous new growth, but I definitely want to take some of that off because next year when it produces on this branch, it's going to produce down here on a much stronger branch. And that's kind of how we prune fruit trees. And again, there's great information out there. If you ever need to really get kind of specific on a fruit tree, you can always take a picture, bring it in, let us look at it, bring in some leaves. That'll help us kind of identify what you're dealing with and working with. But that's how you prune your fruit trees. So very, very simple. Do that while they're young. As they get bigger, as they get into that 10 to 12 foot range, then you can kind of let them be free and go because you've created that nice, thick, branching structure, which really helps hold that fruit longer. So that's kind of your basics on fruit trees. Again, too many varieties for me to go into. Lots of information there. But your basics are plant it, make sure to water it initially, get it established. After that, you're pretty good. Watch it in the summer if we get really, really hot. Keep them mulched, very important. Prune initially for the first couple years, and then know that spray schedule. To know how to spray your fruit trees is super, super important. Again, a lot of people I would tell, plant your fruit tree for the first year, see how it does. If you don't experience any issues, great. You don't have to do any spraying. Maybe you just got lucky. Maybe you live in an area that you don't have any issues in. But if you do start to experience issues, get on the fruit tree spray schedule and start early. It's the best way to do it. If you've missed it and you know you've got issues and you're dealing with them right now, still come in. It's not too late to get on it. It'll at least help some. But then next year, you'll know that schedule, and that's very, very important. Pre-bloom, after bloom, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 4 weeks. So we get in all those 6 sprays, and really helps with the disease and insect issues that occur in our fruit trees. Quick note on persimmons. Persimmons are great. Obviously, it's all I had to bring in here and show you. But persimmons are very, very easy to grow. They grow great in this area. They do typically get a little bit bigger than our semi-dwarf or dwarf fruit trees. Typically somewhere in that 20 foot range, 20 to 25 foot range. So they're bigger trees. But persimmons are natural growing trees in this area anyways. Now, they're the wild persimmons, and they're typically not super, super edible for us humans. But a lot of us love persimmons. If you've ever eaten one, they're very, very mild, great crispy fruit, especially the astringent and non-astringent varieties. There's a difference there, so knowing the difference there helps. But persimmons are very easy to grow, and they don't have a lot of disease or insect issues. So that's why we grow so many of them, and that's why we have some in stock. Great option for another different ones. You can use them in fruit salads. You can use them to make smoothies. There are lots of different options to use the persimmon fruit. So if you've ever had one, check them out. When you see them in the supermarket, sometimes grab one. They're very, very good. They're very tasty. If you like the taste of them, then know that you can grow them in this area very easily. Most of these, of course, are our Asian varieties. Those are the most edible types. Our wild persimmons are not typically used. They used to use persimmon wood for golf clubs when we had wood drivers because they grow naturally in this area. So persimmon trees are a great option. So the last one I'm going to talk about are figs. Figs are one of my favorites. I saved it for last because it's my favorite fruit to grow because it's so easy. I mean, it's just one of the easiest fruit trees to grow. They really have hardly any issues. They're very cool because you can grow them as a tree or a large shrub. I know in my previous home I had one that was a perfect little lollipop shape. I had that one nice trunk, had that nice crown to it. It was awesome. Great fruit. They're so sweet. It's like nature's candy. Very, very sweet. Very minimal disease or insect issues. I very rarely see any of those. If we get an extremely cold winter, typically not going to happen here on the south side. But if you live up on the peninsula into Williamsburg, of course there's some in Jamestown that have been growing there for years and years and years. But sometimes in an extremely cold winter, the plant could die back, but usually the root system comes right back and it'll send out new shoots. But that's really, really rare. I haven't seen that happen in a very, very long time, so we typically don't have to worry about that. The leaves are great. They're very durable. They're really cool looking shape. I love the shape of a fig leaf. Lots of them have different types of shapes of leaves, but they kind of have this texture to them that you would know when you feel it. It's like, no animal would like to eat that. So deer and rabbit resistant, no issues there. Multi-trunk, I love them when they grow multi-trunk. So grow them as a big bush and then go in there and prune out some of that lower branching structure to create kind of that crepe myrtle kind of shape in the tree. Because most of your figs are going to get somewhere between 10 to 15 feet high. And why? Big bushes. You can let them grow as just a bush. I know as a kid I used to climb in big bushes, and figs were a great one to kind of go in and climb into. But the fruit is just amazing on them. Typically you're going to get it a little bit later, so that a lot of different varieties. Brown turkey, Celeste are some of our favorites. We'll carry those as well. But typically figs are going to fruit around that July, August, September timeframe. So it's a little bit of a later crop, which is awesome. The only issue that I've ever experienced with my figs is wasps. I know a lot of us probably, if you've grown a fig tree, know that. As that fruit starts to crack open, wasps love that super, super sweet, and they'll get in there and they'll kind of tend to eat at the fruit. What I tell people is try not to let your fruit start to crack that much. And the best way to know if a fig is ripe is give it a little kind of squeeze. If it feels real soft and it comes off very easily, you know it's ready. Also, when you pull a fig off, if you get a lot of white sap coming out, it's not poisonous, don't worry. I know people get worried about white sap. It's completely natural for a fig. It might be irritating to the skin, so watch that. Use gloves. But if you get a lot of white sap, then it's probably not ripe yet either. So you want to be able to just easily pull that fruit off the fig tree. But figs are super, super durable. Very easy, quick growing, produce very quickly. So this one will produce this year probably or next, and then they'll continue to produce year after year. So that when they're young, in their infancy, they grow very quickly. They don't require a lot of fertilizer, plant food, soil amendments. Of course, I always recommend investing in your soil and fertilizing your plants, but they don't require a lot of work. They're very low maintenance plants. Gorgeous, gorgeous plants, I think. I mean, an awesome plant. Only gets, like I said, 10 to 15 feet high and wide. You can grow it as a multi-trunk. You can grow it as a single trunk. Very versatile, very easy to grow. You can prune them back if you want to keep them smaller. Some people can grow them in containers, a nice large container you can grow them in. So extremely easy to grow. Just one of my favorites because they're very reliable, very easy. You don't have to deal with a lot. And of course, I don't have a lot on my list because there's just not a lot to talk about other than they're so easy to grow. Great time to plant them again is in the fall. So that's a great option for your figs. Again, if we're a little low on quantity at this current time, try planting them in the fall. It's a great time to plant them. Next year, you'll be eating figs. So real quick, that's kind of my issue. That's kind of my thing on figs. Let me just look around and make sure I kind of talked about everything. I think I did. If we want to, let's see, I didn't mention Biotone. Biotone Starter, of course, I love. Biotone Starter is a starter fertilizer. So whenever we're planting anything new, we always want to mix Biotone into our soil, get it right to the root system. When you do that, you get mycorrhizae and beneficial bacteria right to the root system. Helps kind of get those roots generated, and it forms a symbiotic relationship that lasts the entirety of the plant. So it's a great option to use Biotone Starter, even with fruits, veggies, herbs, anything edible, anything. Trees, shrubs, perennials, annuals, great starter fertilizer. I did not mention my blooming and rooting, so I always bring this whenever I talk about fruits and veggies and berries, because if we need more blooms, whenever you look at your fertilizers, you got those three numbers. So you got nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And don't worry about that so much. Just remember up, down, all around. And so what I say is the upward growth is the first one. Nitrogen forms green growth, leaves. Sometimes you want that. Down is root system. It's going to help your root system grow. Phosphorus is going to produce more roots and in turn produces more blooms. So that's why this one's called blooming and rooting, because it's got a lot of phosphorus. And then potassium's all around, up, down, all around. Potassium just kind of helps the all-around health of the plant. So phosphorus is going to help root systems grow as well as create more blooms. So that's why this is called a blooming and rooting formula, because it's a 9-58-8. Very high in phosphorus, which is going to force some of those blooms. Great for annuals, vegetables. So this is a great little thing if you're lacking in blooms. And when you lack in blooms, you lack in fruit and you lack in food. So this is a great option to kind of help force that plant to produce some blooms because maybe the phosphorus is lacking in the soil. So water soluble, you mix a tablespoon in a gallon of water and you water your plants. And it's just a great kind of instant boost of phosphorus, helps them bloom and produce more fruit, so much easier. So lastly, I will mention, as I told you I would, for mulching. Mulching is very important with all of these. I think it's very important to do it with our veggies, our herbs, all of our fruits and berries. Super important to mulch. What mulching does is it keeps your soil warm in the wintertime, keeps it cool in the summertime, and it keeps an even moisture level. And then also with strawberries or blackberries or raspberries or other fruits, it keeps them off the ground. So using pine straw, pine bark, just regular hardwood mulch, any of those mulches not only help keep it more acidic for your blueberries, but also keeps the fruit off the ground of your straw, or keeps the strawberries off the ground, because mud is going to cause that fruit to rot very quickly. So I definitely recommend mulching all the time. We've got lots of different options. You've got pine straw, which I love, pine bark mulch, cypress, cedar, all your hardwoods, dyed different types of colors of hardwood. So great options there. And again, I just really recommend mulching because it helps keep the weeds away. Any kind of weeds or grass that grow up around your plants are going to take nutrients from your desirable plant first, and then leave whatever left to what you are growing, your blueberry, your strawberry. So keep the weeds out. Mulching helps with that as well. Keeps your plants clean, makes them look prettier, and it's just a great way of kind of keeping a consistent moisture level and a consistent temperature in your soil. So I always recommend mulching whenever you're doing any edibles. I think it really helps. So that's kind of my tips and tricks on growing fruits and berries. So I hope you enjoyed this seminar. Thanks again for joining us for all of these webinars. If you wanted to look at our list of what's coming up next week, go to our webpage and check the events tab at mcdonaldgardencenter.com. And that will tell you all of our different webinars that are coming up here in the future. We're scheduled out through mid-June. If you've got other things that you want us to talk about, please let us know if there's any other topics that you feel like we want to touch on, and we'll try and get to them as we continue to go on with this. So again, thanks for joining me. I'm going to come around and answer your questions. I couldn't see myself, but I hope you can see me. So again, thanks for joining me, and I hope you learned a lot on how to grow fruits and berries here in Hampton Roads. All right, if you're leaving, have a great day. I'm going to come over and answer your questions. All right, give me 1 second here. All right. Let's see, hopefully you can see me. I gotta get the password for my computer entered in here because that went down. All right, so let's get that in. All right. All right, so let's start at the beginning. Everybody saying hello. All right, so Maria said, I have a mandarin orange tree and something is eating the green oranges off of it before they can reach a good size. Any thoughts on what could do that? Probably a squirrel. Could be a couple different things. I mean, it could be raccoons, could be lots of different, but it's most likely an animal. I doubt it's birds. So using something like the squirrel repellent would probably help because most likely it's squirrels that are getting to it. So I didn't talk about citrus trees too specifically here because I just we don't have a lot of them in selection right now, and I really want to keep it just to berries and fruits. But yes, citrus are great trees to grow, and most likely that's a squirrel. So I think I would use that. Now you can just get an animal repellent like that capsaicin, the one made by Bonide. That'll protect over all the animals. So that would be what I would recommend for your case. Denise said, I was given strawberry plants and interested in what and how to grow. I hope I helped with the talk on strawberries. So I hope you learned a lot there. Grow them in lots of different areas. I love them in the ground and just thin them out every once in a while is really what I recommend, Denise. Frankie said, question, how do you feel about mushroom compost topsoil to create raised beds in order to implement no-till? I live in Buckingham, Virginia. I love mushroom compost and topsoil. I would use those two in conjunction to form the base of your soil. And then I would recommend using perlite and peat moss to help fluffing that mix up. Because if you just use compost and topsoil, what typically is going to happen is going to become a very thick mix. It's going to get very dense. And we want to keep that light, especially in a raised bed. So I definitely recommend using peat moss or perlite to amend that mix. But I love mushroom compost. Very good stuff. And then Frankie said, fish and seaweed emulsion, do you think they are good as an overall fertilizer for the garden fruit, hedge fruit trees? Yeah, so fish emulsion is great. It's a little bit light, but it's a great organic. It's a lot of nitrogen typically, so I know our fish emulsion I think is like a 600, so it's typically just nitrogen, so it's not going to give you that phosphorus or potassium. So that's why I typically like my granular fertilizers over a liquid feed, but it's a great option, especially as a foliage spray. So I know I mentioned don't water our leaves, but if you're using a fish emulsion or seaweed emulsion, you can use that as a topical kind of fertilizer for your leaves. And that's how I would do that, especially if you're seeing issues. It'll kind of help revive your plant. So Catherine said, love watching your videos. Thank you. All right, so Corey says, which at-home kits would you recommend for testing soil pH? Well, I sell one made by Rapid-Test. It's just a basic pH tester. We also have one that'll test nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium if you want to know your levels there. So those at-home kits, they just come with a little plastic bottle, has a little, just like you would test like a water pH. If you have like a fish tank or a pool, you might be used to those. But these are specifically designed for soils. They come with a pill, and you basically just drop it into the water and your soil mixture, and then it'll kind of read you a color. So that's the ones I recommend. You can get a probe tester. So I sell a light moisture and pH meter, which aren't quite as precise. You just stick it in the soil. It'll tell you kind of a general pH range, which is helpful. And again, if you want to get very specific, we have a very high-end, very nice pH tester, and we do them for free, Corey. So if you'd like to come in, we can do a free pH test and get you on your way pretty quickly. Christine, any advice for lemon trees? I bought from you around early March. Put fertilizer sticks in pot and slow growth. I will repot soon. How often should I water? Also, soil type. We bought a soil for lemons. So it sounds like you're doing everything all right. I don't really recommend the fertilizer spikes or sticks as much anymore. And the reason being is because they fertilize a specific area. They don't typically fertilize the entire root system, which is what we want. So I would recommend a citrus tone next time. Espoma makes a great citrus fertilizer, so citrus tone is what I'd recommend. They are slow growing. If you're growing it indoors, Christine, then you definitely are going to see a slower growth habit for sure. I mean, we've had cool weather too. Think citrus, think Florida. Warmer weather, that's what they want. So we haven't had a lot of warm weather yet, which would encourage a lot of that new growth. So my guess is it's doing perfectly fine. You definitely want to do them in containers, so you want to use a potting soil. I hope that's what we suggested that you use. And then in a pot right now, you're probably watering every 3 to 4 days. Not that much, especially if you repotted it and you've got some extra soil around it. If it's a little bit root bound, we might be watering a little bit more. When we get into the summer months, you're going to want to water it a little bit more for sure, at least every 1 to 2 days, just to keep that soil evenly moist. Citrus trees need a lot of moisture to create those lemons. So think Florida again, you know, all those afternoon showers. What is a good companion for strawberries in a garden with other things? Well, you can grow lots of different things with strawberries. Now, strawberries are going to spread in the garden. So again, you can do them with blueberries. You can do them with other things. A lot of times I'll plant lantana to attract butterflies to the area. I'll plant marigolds with them to ward off any of those other pests that I don't want. So those might be some good companion plants. But definitely they grow well with other things. They are spreaders, so I typically won't plant them with smaller plants that it could overtake, like other herbs. I might not plant my strawberries near my herbs, especially if I'm doing all of them in the ground, because strawberries are spreaders, and they're going to spread across on the ground, and they can form a pretty dense patch pretty quickly, and it can choke out some of those smaller plants. But I would encourage some other flowering plants just to get the beneficial insects in there, the bees and the butterflies to help with the pollination, and that will help you with your strawberries. What would be a good fertilizer to feed my lemon and lime plants? Citrus tone. I always recommend citrus tone. I love that one. If you're seeing a little bit of lime green growth or the yellowing in the leaves, you might need to add an iron, a chelated liquid iron, or chelated, as some might say. But liquid iron sometimes might help if you're seeing anything in your leaves. But if your leaves look healthy, citrus tone, great fertilizer. Again, fertilize when it's done blooming. Fertilize again after you harvest your fruit, and you might need to fertilize 2 or 3 times in there because citrus and lemons and limes take a long time to produce that fruit, and they're going to use a lot of nutrients, and we're growing them in pots in our area, Liz. So if you're growing them in pots, you're going to fertilize a little bit more, typically every 4 to 5 weeks through the growing season. Then once we get into the fall, winter time frame, you're bringing them back indoors. You don't need to fertilize as much inside. Catherine said, should you cut the shoots off the strawberries before they root? Will the shoots produce roots? Or should I place the shoots in the soil and wait for them to root before cutting them off from the mother plant? I just don't want to harm. Catherine, you can do it really any way. I typically will take the shoot and let it sit on soil. So especially because I grow a lot of my strawberries in the ground, I'll let that shoot kind of come off. It'll hit the soil. I see it rooting in, and then I'll cut it off, and then I can transplant it to a different location if I want to. Especially if I'm trying to keep that 12-inch spacing and keep those plants separated a little bit more. Now, in a strawberry pot, that might be harder to do because you can't really kind of force that thing into, or maybe the shoot wasn't long enough. So there, start to wait for that new shoot to form. You'll see little things coming out of the bottom of those new baby plants. It'll start to form these little roots that'll pop out. Once you see those, you're safe to cut it off, stick it in some soil, and let it root in pretty quickly there. So that hopefully helps you, but you can do it really either way. But waiting till they root into soil is a great way to know, okay, it's safe. It's forming its own root system. I can go. Also, what causes the leaves on strawberries and other berries to turn brown, yellow, red? What can I do to help them? So brown, yellow, and red, I mean, they could mean lots of different things. If it's brown and wet and soggy still, Catherine, could be too much water. If it's brown and crispy, not enough water. Yellow and red typically means that they're older leaves, and because that's kind of almost like, think of like the fall with the tree. As those leaves have been on there, they're done, they're about to fall off. They kind of form a different color, so yellow and red leaves typically are going to mean that they're older leaves. Go in there and cut them off. We don't want the plant to force a lot of energy into those leaves, and we want it to produce new leaves and be healthy. So take off some of those bad leaves, and that will help kind of rejuvenate. Now, in those yellow and red leaves, if you see some black spots, could be a bacterial leaf spot that can occur with some of our strawberries in our area, especially with the weather we've had this year. So that could be the issue, but you would notice that. So take the yellow and red leaves off, and if you see some black spots in there, could be a leaf spot, but I doubt it. Most likely, we just need to send the energy into good leaves. If you grow your strawberries in a pot, what do you do in the winter? I live in zone 6A. Strawberries are pretty hardy, Denise, so I don't know which type of strawberries. I don't know if this even lists our zones for this strawberry. So this one says hardy to zones 5 to 8. I mean, I know you can grow strawberries all the way up into Canada. So there are some varieties that are extremely hardy. I think you're probably going to be pretty safe, Denise, with most strawberries if you're growing them in pots. If you were really worried, if you got a very, very cold, week or two, you could bring them in the garage and they would protect them and keep them safe during that extremely cold time. And I don't know 6A as well as I do 8A or 8B. We're in that 8 zone. Most of our strawberries are pretty much evergreen. Now, some strawberries in your area might completely defoliate and then come back from root, come back from the crown again. So that hopefully helps you. I would check on the variety. If you know the variety, just do a little bit of research into that variety, and then it should tell you what zones that grows in. Everybody's saying I'm not having any issues, so I guess this was the point where I lost my screen, which I still don't have. So thank you for telling me and responding so I knew what was going on. Stephanie said, as the plant ages, does the pots affect the grow of the... So yes, great question, Stephanie. If you're growing anything in a container, it's probably not going to get as big as it would in the ground because the roots are constricted. And eventually, the roots are going to take over that pot, and you're not going to be able to keep it in that pot. So we either need to upgrade into a larger pot or go into the ground. Not sure specifically what we were talking about at that time. Maybe it was a blueberry or a fig or something like that, because you can grow a lot of different things in containers. We just need to upgrade if we can. I wouldn't do root cuttings on my fruit trees. Maybe a fig you could take and do a root cutting. A little bit more science behind that we could talk about later, Stephanie. But typically, I'm not going to recommend root cutting. I'm going to take my plant out. Okay, I've got this wrapping root system. I need to get into a bigger pot, loosen the root ball a little bit, put it in a bigger pot with more soil for it to grow in. But it will affect the plant for sure. As those plants get older, there's not as much soil capacity, so you're going to be watering more, you're going to be needing to fertilize more because a lot of that water is just rushing over the root system. It's so big. So eventually going into the ground might be an option or growing into a bigger pot. Justin said, will this be available to watch again? Yes, definitely. We'll have it posted on our Facebook page as well as our website, mcdonaldgardencenter.com. Betsy said you can use the blueberry leaf to make tea. That's right, you sure can. I didn't mention that. That's a great idea. So Justin, great question. Do we spray the whole tree, including the trunk? Yes, for sure. So when we're talking about fruit tree sprays, we want to spray the entire plant. Typically, before they bloom, there's no leaves on it anyway. So we're spraying branches, trunks, everything to the point where it's almost dripping wet. Because a lot of our fruit trees will get scale or different types of borers and stuff like that. So we want to get it on the bark as well as the leaves. So when we spray a fruit tree that is leafed out, in that 4-week time frame, after the blooms have fallen off, then we want to get inside the tree first, spray on the inside, get in there as much as you can, spray on the inside, get the bark, get everything, and then come out and spray the canopy as well. So you're getting in there as much as you possibly can. So Tony said, have you had good experience or carry serviceberry trees? Yeah, I think we actually do have some serviceberries. I didn't bring those in. That's a great berry. I have one that produced fruit. The next year after I planted it, it continues to produce lots of edible berries. That's true, Tony. Great point. I didn't bring a serviceberry in here. I should have. That was a good idea. Serviceberries are awesome trees. Multi-trunked, kind of look like a crepe myrtle. Very easy, native tree. Birds love the berries, so hopefully you get the berries before the birds do. But very similar to a blueberry. Awesome, awesome tree. Typically get about 20 feet high, maybe about 10 to 15 feet wide. Great little canopy, multi-trunk typically. Awesome, awesome tree. Great point, Tony. And we do carry some. I don't always have them, but I think I do have some out there. I saw them the other day. Denise said, blueberry bush has reddish leaves. Is that normal? Just planted a month ago. Denise, it is somewhat normal, especially a month ago, because they probably hadn't put out new growth. So this one right here has a lot of this new growth on it. Looks great. Probably was grown in a greenhouse for a little while. So if you bought it, a blueberry bush about a month ago, it might have still had some of that fall winter color on it. You should start seeing it leaf out with some new growth now. If you haven't, then I might start to get a little bit concerned. But again, blueberries don't have a lot of issues. Bacterial leaf spot, like I mentioned with the strawberry issue. So I would say maybe cut off a piece and bring it in, or take a picture of it and send it to our Facebook page and let me look at it. That might help kind of determine what the issue is. But usually if it's a red growth on a blueberry, that's its fall winter color, and maybe it just hasn't jumped out with its new growth yet. So great question, Denise. All right, so how close do bushes like blackberry and blueberry bushes need to be for cross-pollination? Great question. They don't really need to be that close. Within at least 100, 150 feet. So we don't need to line all these things up. Of course, the closer they are, the better. I always tell people the closer they are, the better with pollination. So if I'm planting 2 apple trees and they get 10 to 12 feet wide, then I need to plant them at least 10 to 15 feet apart at least. And so having them closer is going to assure cross-pollination. I mean, at that point, even the wind can cross-pollinate. If you don't have the space and you want to plant them across the yard from each other, that is perfectly fine. And that's why I mentioned when we're talking about fruit trees, some people are like, I only have space for one tree and I really want a Granny Smith. Well, I can't guarantee that a neighbor might have an apple tree, but a lot of people grow apple trees, and so you might get cross-pollination from a couple hundred yards away because bees are moving around and cross-pollinating. Now, of course, the closer they are, the better they're going to be. For sure. How close? So then, pear tree has leaves. So Denise is saying the pear tree has leaves down the trunk. Should I prune these? Yes, that's also a sign that maybe your pear is struggling a little bit. A lot of times it should be pushing up growth up to the top. If it's pushing growth down along its trunk, that typically means that we might have some sort of other issue, some sort of fungus issue, disease issue. It's trying to grow from healthy tissue rather than putting energy into a disease or a struggling tissue. So that Super Thrive product would be a great option to maybe take the shock off of it. Look at your leaves, make sure there's no other issues. Get on that spray schedule. I don't want to recommend taking those leaves off yet if there's not enough leaves on the top. If your leaves on the top of your pear tree look good, then I would take those branches off and then spray it with the fruit tree spray or the triple action. Because anytime we make a cut, we've got a live open wound, and that means borers and other insect and disease issues can get in there. So after we make cuts on our fruit trees, I forgot to mention that, Denise, then we want to spray down our tree. So great point. If you've got branches coming out of that trunk, Typically, you're not going to want those there, but that typically is a sign of something else occurring. And maybe we need to look at that a little bit closer. But if your top looks great, looks healthy, everything's growing fine, take those lower branches, those lower new shoots off, because it'll force your energy back up into the top of the tree. Sometimes it just naturally happens. All right, everybody's saying thanks. I feel a little braver to try blueberries and strawberries now. Good. I missed the part on mulching strawberries. Do you recommend it? Sorry. Janet, yes, I do recommend it. Using any kind of mulch helps. It keeps the strawberries clean, keeps the moisture level consistent through these fluctuating temperatures that we've been having. It keeps it a little bit more consistent. So I definitely recommend mulching our strawberries, blueberries, everything. Always recommend it. It always helps. Keeps the weeds out too. So really do recommend it. Kat said, I would like to get the name of the fruit tree spray that is organic to spray on 6 times during the growing season. Kat, it is Fertilome's Triple Action. So hopefully you can see that. I can't see what's on the screen, so I have no clue. But Kat, this is what I would recommend. It's completely organic, completely safe. It's just neem oil and chrysanthemum oil. Neem oil is going to work as a suffocant, but Fertilome's Triple Action, it's a must-have in the shed. In your garage, because again, it's an insecticide, miticide, and fungicide. It does all 3 things, and it works great for fruit trees and vegetables. Let's see. Justin said, awesome info, good. And then Frankie, I think you finished it off. Thank you all so much for bringing this information to us. Good. I'm so glad you all enjoyed this. Thank you again for joining. Sorry for our little glitch. That's so weird, but hopefully we'll get that fixed, because I don't know if my head is even on the screen right now. But thanks again for joining me. Great day. Gorgeous weekend. Enjoy. Have a happy Memorial Day weekend. Stay safe out there. Get out in the yard. Do some yard work. Work on your berries and your other plants, and have fun. And we'll. Oh, we got one more. Tava said, is it too late to ask you to go into more detail on caning a blackberry bush? So basically caning, like I said, they're all cane berries. They grow on these long shoots, these canes typically. And so what you want to do is just go in and take the entire cane out. If it's old and it's not bearing fruit. Now, if it's bearing fruit every year, leave it on there. It's hard to say. So kind of what I like to do is take like a marking tape or just a little piece of a string or something that's not going to hurt the branch, and I'll mark it and say this one's been producing great. So I'm not going to cut this one off. You can even use just a little piece of like a twist tie or something that, but you don't want to hurt the branch. But any kind of marking or just knowing, okay, this branch is producing, this branch has been there, this cane. Sorry, I keep saying branch. This cane has been here for 2 years now. I haven't gotten a single berry from it. Then that would be the one you would want to take off. It's done producing. You need to push the energy into producing new canes. Typically, on all of your blackberries and raspberries, you're going to get the best fruit production on your 2nd year cane. So it's going to be the 1st year, it's going to grow a lot. You might get a couple berries. The 2nd year is when it's going to produce the heaviest. And then if you wanted to, you can go and take it off after that season. And then in the spring, you'll get all brand new canes. So that's kind of a little bit more detail on caning blackberries and raspberries. All right, everybody. Have a great day. Tabitha, I hope that answered your question. Enjoy talking about berries and fruits with everybody. Enjoy the weekend. Have a great day, and we'll see you later.